Tato. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Dunedin City Council, and as usual we'll open with a prayer, and leading the prayer today is the Reverend Greg Hewson, University Chaplain. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you everyone. I'd just like to do a little promotion for the Town and Gown cricket match. Dunedin City Council versus University of Otago on Monday the 6th of March 12 till 2, so that's going to be a beautifully fine day just like today. Come along. So you've got a huge agenda, and I've been through it, and I've just picked up a few key words for the prayer or reflection, so let us pray. Kia tato. We give thanks for the Council, for the commitment of people to spend this time and to give of their own gifts to serve the community. We pray for wisdom as the large and complex agenda is worked through. We pray for clarity and wisdom as very important issues are explored to do with alcohol restrictions tonight and through the week, cosy homes, interfaith, council appointments, refugee steering group, issues of ecology and biodiversity, annual plan, emissions trading scheme, proposed carbon management policy. We pray for the tertiary precinct safety and accessibility upgrade discussions, for parks and recreation, arts and culture oversight, community board work, and the council's social housing strategy. We pray for decisions being made about food resilience and community engagement as work proceeds towards the annual plan for this and next year. We pray for all those who work with the poor and those who struggle in our community, for those who have been and will be unemployed. Pray for those working in the area of suicide prevention, for those working in South Dunedin, St Clair Protection and Rejuvenation. Pray for progress with the new hospital, and for transparency in how we are doing in the area of goals for the long term as a city and community. We pray for clear, decisive planning for future generations, family and communities to be safe, well cared for and proud to call Dunedin home. Amen.
And with regard to the Town and Gown cricket match, you may be aware that my being the umpire last time did us no good at all, so we may be calling on more of your prayers, Greg, as we go into that match, depending on the talent that we can raise. Right, public forum, and our first submitter to public forum is Alex Bauman, Chief Executive Officer of High Performance Sport New Zealand. Welcome. You may just need to check if the mic's on.
Testing, 1, 2, great, thanks. Thank you very much, Mayor and councillors. This is the 4th year that I've presented back to council, and I would like to introduce Dean Horrow, who is the regional manager here in Dunedin for High Performance Sport New Zealand. And what I usually do is just give a bit of a synopsis review of the last 12 months. Last year was certainly a big year for the Olympics and the Paralympics, and I would like to congratulate Dunedin. Had a big part on the Paralympic front with 4 medalists coming in para-athletics, so congratulations on that, and I'm happy to take questions afterwards. So just a quick overview in terms of why central government actually gives us $66 million per annum, and you do actually have the presentation in front of you as well. It's really the value proposition of high performance sport in that it unites the nation, it creates role models, it inspires participation, and it motivates future champions as well. And we do have some great role models. The Olympic team, 35 athletes brought back medals. In 2012, it was 27 athletes. On the Paralympic front, we do have some great role models. Liam, obviously Sophie, Cam, Nikita, Anna, and Mary Price. as well. 12 athletes brought back medals, which is an incredible feat. One of the keys for us is building a system for high performance. If you take a look at the number of sports that brought back medals from Rio, it was 9. In Sydney, it was 3. So we are progressing in the right direction, and it does really denote a systems approach. We're not a country that just has one sport that produces medals. For example, Jamaica in athletics. In terms of progression in medals, in fourths and top eights, we've gone from 4 in Sydney to 18 in Rio, which was a record for us. 2012 was 13 medals. In terms of fourth place finishes, we've gone from 1 to 9, and top 8, we've gone from 18 to 40. We were a bit unlucky that we had 9 silver medals as well. Unfortunately, our gold medal count went down slightly from 6 to 4 from London to Rio. So we do have more work to do. On the Paralympic front, again, a good progression, particularly from Athens in 2004, where we had 6 gold. We had 9 gold in Rio, and in terms of medals, 18 in Sydney, but 10 in Athens and 21 in Rio, which was an outstanding result. New Zealand is first per capita per medals, and also first per capita on the gold medal count. I think what is more interesting is when you take a look at the rankings in the world, New Zealand is 13th. It moved up 8 places from 2012, only 31 athletes. If you compare that to Japan, who came 60th, no gold medals, 127 million population and 132 athletes at the Para Games in Rio. So an outstanding achievement by our para athletes. And as I mentioned, you should be proud of these athletes, 4 medalists that come from Dunedin. Obviously, Raylene Bates coaches them, and the mayor is in that picture. So you had a significant impact on the progression of para-athletics in this country. In 2012, we had no medals in athletics. In 2016, we have 9 medals, which is an outstanding achievement. What we try to achieve in New Zealand is having high-performance hubs. We have 6 hubs, and obviously Dunedin is an important part of that. We try to develop athletes, we try to identify talent, and ultimately we try to ensure that our athletes can win on the world stage. So we are trying to create that one-stop shop, give athletes the services and support that they need, so that gives them every opportunity to compete on the world stage. And it is an important precinct for us. We are trying to create a vibrant hub, and I won't go over this, but certainly there's a lot of activity at the facility at Forsyth Bar Stadium, and not just obviously athletes from High Performance Sport New Zealand, but others as well. And we need to encourage that because if we truly want to build a sustainable system, we need a pathway for our athletes and coaches and provide them opportunities to compete not only domestically, but internationally as well. So finally, before I hand it over to questions, I would like to thank you for your ongoing support. It is a very strong partnership, and we're placed well. There's some challenges that we have in the future, but we're looking at Tokyo 2020, not only in Olympics and Paralympics, but also we're taking a look at sports that are non-Olympic, and we want to adhere to that philosophy of being performance-driven, coach-led, and athlete-focused. So I'm happy to take any questions at this point in time.
Thank you, Alex. Questions, councillors? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much for your time today. I was just intrigued with your list of people that use your facilities, and having sat around this table for some time, I'm very aware that what we were given the impression would be able to happen at the sports centre. Having been pulled in at late notice to do some managing of a hockey team last year in the under-21 side in Dunedin. I was surprised that there was no access provided then to the ice baths. The girls had to go into the harbour. And I'm just wondering how widely, outside of the professional sports, those facilities are used at in order to inspire people about the facilities in Dunedin.
In terms of the level of athletes or who
Yeah.
actually is attending?
Yeah.
Well, we try to make it as wide as possible. Obviously, the priority is carded athletes, but then there's agreements in place. I think there could be negotiations if it's done well in advance for other teams to come in, because hockey is a targeted sport for us and we're interested in that pathway as well. But it just depends in terms of availability as well.
Okay.
Councillor Wiley.
Alex, Otago University is a great setup for education along with the Polytech. How is, high performance sport working with these athletes, no matter where they are around the country, to actually see Dunedin as a hub for education and sport?
Yeah. I think for us it's critical that we have a holistic development for our athletes. So we do have a Prime Minister's Scholarship Fund of $4.25 million per year where we can give scholarships. So there's two aspects. One is ensuring that we have that holistic development of the athletes and we take care of those athletes depending on where they are in the country. At some point in time they may have to centralise, and whether that's in Auckland or Cambridge, Karapiro, that's what the National Sporting Organisation dictates. But what we're interested in is certainly those up-and-coming athletes to ensure that we provide them opportunities. So there is a link with universities. There's probably a link with AUT at this point in time in terms of providing PhD students to provide succession planning for our staff. But then we have to ensure that we provide educational opportunities for our athletes as well, and that comes in scholarships from the Prime Minister's Scholarship Funds, 10,000 per annum plus a 2,500 study allowance per semester as well. It's not ideal. It's not like the U.S. system, the NC2A, where you can have competition aligned with the study. So sometimes athletes have to move around, but it is trying to provide some of those opportunities.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thanks for coming down, Alex. I just want to follow up on Councillor Wiley's question. What's your interaction with the physical education school, and in terms of training, and with the Polytech as well, relationship between academic staff and your actual training facility?
Yeah, I mean, Dean would probably be better to answer that. I mean, in terms of the actual synergy between the university, there probably isn't a great synergy right now, other than obviously a lot of students from Otago come to become our staff, whether they're physiologists, biomechanists, human movement specialists. Right now we're pretty self-contained because it is quite specialized in terms of performance support that we use, but we are delving into research and innovation, and we do have connections with commercial bodies and universities in terms of providing that 1% edge for our athletes. So we are exploring that at this point in time.
Councillor Laufiso.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation and time. I just want to know if you have a breakdown of your $66 million, what percentage of that is expended on women's sport and women's athletes?
Yeah, it's a good question. Interestingly enough, the medals that were brought back were predominantly women. In terms of, we could get you the breakdown, but what happens is 34.3 million goes to national sporting organizations, and ultimately they drive the programs. There's 10 million in athlete performance support, which really gives support to athletes, whether they're male or female. Physiology, biomechanics, medical, physio. There's 4.25 in Prime Minister's scholarship. The rest is for the hubs, which is about 1.25 million. So I think there's a fairly good mix right now. Now with new Olympic events as well in 2020, softball, we started supporting softball women. We are not supporting softball, baseball men at this point in time. So there is a good mix. It's quite interesting that the team dynamics for the Olympics, the females actually outnumber the men, which is positive.
Councillor Elder.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation. Question was, what is the vision for Dunedin going forward? Like, have you got plans for bigger things, or to target certain things, or become a specialty area like, say, Cambridge or whatever?
Yeah, it's a good question. Interestingly enough, we have 3 staff here for the Knowledge for Tokyo, which really looks at the intelligence gathering so that we can learn for future cycles. So that is based here. For me, it's really ensuring that the regional strategy is individualized so we can target some specific initiatives for Dunedin, but to make it a vibrant hub. And I think one of the gaps and challenges we have is still in that talent space. We're not doing enough in talent space, so we have a program called Pathway to Podium, but I think we need to revisit that, whether it's actually doing what it needs to do. So I'm very keen to take a look at a more targeted approach to talent development in the regions, because, as I mentioned, that's the sustainability. We're a small population. We can't compete against these countries that have millions and millions of population. So we have to do it better, and that really means having better quality coaches and providing that pathway for athletes as well. So there are some things in the works. It is challenging because it seems like it's moving. So in the last 4 years, a lot of centralization has happened, but we can't just do centralization without supporting some of the young athletes coming through. Otherwise, it's very temporary.
I was just thinking in regards to that, in the sense of, we've got, physio school, physics school, we've got Institute of Sport, etc. So we have got really great facilities, and so it'll be great to.
We have to use them and make sure we have vibrant hubs. Like, our strategy is not to reduce the hubs, it's making sure that we have that active precinct, we have enough athletes going through, and ultimately at some point in time they may have to centralize, but providing those opportunities is critical.
Thank you.
No more questions? Alex, thank you very much
Thank you
for
very
your
much.
presentation. Our next submitter is Bradley Curnow of the Aramoana Conservation Trust. Welcome, Bradley.
Thank you very much for taking the time out to listen to us today. I realise some councillors have heard this for the 3rd time, but a lot of you haven't heard from us before at all. So thank you for that. My fellow Aramoana person here, Adrian Hall, will begin. We're going to co-chair this talk. So here he is.
Believe it or not, I'm attempting 2.5 minutes or less. Erin will be surprised. I'm going to do it on my feet, really, because first of all I wanted to introduce the geography, which is not that commonly appreciated. And a lot of our argument is about the geography, how it relates to the ecology of this area. This is a shot of mine from a commercial airplane. I was off to Auckland for a show one time. And everything was perfect. The area we're discussing really mainly is down here, this tunnel, and that little sprig there is the old wharf. When I came here some 15 years ago or more, I discovered Aramoana and found it to be an extraordinary place. And being a long-time artist, very long-time artist, I was appreciative of all the visual splendors. One of the first ones was the wharf. Thank you. And the wharf is set further back from the ecological area of salt marsh here. And before long found myself discovering all kinds of other things. The cruelty of people in general to the salt marsh, which is unique and extraordinary in itself. You just saw a load of damage. And then this kind of wildlife. Thank you. This is as the wharf looks now, more or less. There's another one later on about the piles. Things which I learnt moving out there was these beasts, their scarcity, their rarity, and how privileged we are to have them. Thank you. And the other side of it is this. Now, as a conservation charity trust, we were formed to help and work with DOC in looking after these creatures, both of which are scarce beyond belief. Our local nests have gone down from 18 5 years ago to 2 or 3 in this last year. And that's without that nesting site having any kind of diphtheria, which is killing the rest of this very rare species. It seems just, but, and again, we fight a battle all the time against human beings, their recklessness, their urgency to try out mechanical toys on the beaches to the detriment of the creatures who live there. This is a breeding ground for sea lions. It's been increasing in the past few years, contrary to the sea lions at the other end of the beach. Thank you. This is the wharf at 9:30 this morning. The pilings are remaining, and after being hugely attracted to that wharf because it was so picturesque and delightful, it was only a matter of weeks before passing by at low tide, I realised that 8 of the pilings upon which rested the deck were completely cut through, and there were gaps of some 18 inches. So it became off limits for anybody because it was dangerous. Now it stayed that way until this year when things have erupted a little bit more, and we've become more and more aware that the privilege of having sea lions breeding there and having pups in our area and breeding chicks, thank you, of all kinds. See, this beach is an ecology centre of all kinds of things which are interrelated. Thank you. That was an oyster cattery egg, empty. But we are at the entrance to the harbour, which contains over 200 species of wildlife. Some of them are transient, like the godwits and other beasties, which come in by the hundred and roost up around here. It's not an area which is to be taken lightly. We are indeed privileged, I believe, to have that close to a major city in New Zealand. So to treat it lightly in any kind of way seems to me a bit sad. We have other kinds of sea mammals. This is a tiger, a leopard seal, which had been injured. We get phone calls all the time as an ecological conservation trust, and the leopard seal was because it had been run over by a pleasure craft and was injured with the propeller across its back. This is recently probably the only known case of pregnancy in a male sea lion in Arowana. That was Bradley and I went down to check out whether or not our resident mother was about to produce again, because the monarch had reported activity with sea lion down there, and we thought that perhaps it was Patty about to pup for the second year running. When we got there, we found it was a male. So much for the monarch. But there you see, this is habitat. Okay. Could you just click through those, please? See, as residents and charity trust people. We get down there all the time and manage to have the pleasure of enjoying the company of these very rare creatures. We also administer to sick beasts. We get calls frequently for all kinds for all kinds of animals. And we go down when we can and bring them back. I have facilities at home. Between us, we cover it and get them to dock and discuss the case each by each with dock people. The rangers are very kind and work with us quite closely, and we have other supporters from Forest and Bird, whom you're going to hear from, and outside, like surrounding. Thank you, Bradley.
Questions, councillors? No questions? Thank you very much. Oh,
Bradley is going to...
Just for the avoidance of all doubt, what you're asking us is, I assume, to in due course rescind the council decision to replace the wall.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a critical area. We're privileged to have access to it. This morning at 9:30, there were pedestrian tracks all around. There were happy campers, not campers, happy walkers with rucksacks. People have access to it if they want to get out of their cars and walk a short way. The point of showing that aerial shot, which I was hoping might still be there, was that there is no other access down to that end. People can walk around the beaches either way. And whatever we do in terms of rebuilding or restoring, which at one time I thought was a good idea, there's no way to do it without influencing or affecting that ecology. There are other places to do other pleasurable, more immediate things. We don't want any more car parks. We don't want all of those things, and we don't want the knock-on effect which any kind of commercial, slightly commercial business will have, which will entail big roads down, access, main services and so on. It's a very primitive and privileged little hamlet, that.
Would it be associated, if I may? The other issue that you raised in terms of vehicle damage, and not just to the marsh, but also obvious vehicle tracks on the beaches. Clearly there's a consultation process underway about
Absolutely.
Part of that, but is there any other work that can be done or should be done to restrict boom behaviour in the salt marsh?
We've put in submissions for the recent access to beaches business, and we've expressed our opinion on that. We are also in constant contact with DOC about that. Things do take time, and that business has probably been going on almost as long as the gate, which has been very effective. But there is still the other beach, which leads to the Penguin Beach, where you saw some tracks, and at the moment DOC and us and other people are involved in deciding the most efficient way of dealing with that.
Thank you.
Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Thank you for your time and presentation. As a relatively new councillor, I'm working with the information or what we've heard prior to your coming today from the historic trust, the people who are interested in the restoration. So can you please comment on the community, what's actually happening in the community in Aramoana, and how can you see any community resolution as to the clashes with respect to the historic trust's aim to restore the trust and fundraise, and comment on the fundraising that's been done so far?
Much of that activity is by people who do not live in Aramoana. They live outside. much of the bombast and publicity associated comes from those persons. I am not sure that we can accurately talk about an Aramoana community. This is me, a resident, talking. There are historical grudges, there are historical tragedies, and there are landowners outside of Aramoana with vested interests within that small community. And it probably gathered when property was extremely cheap for various reasons. Now those lots have been sitting around waiting for something to happen. All of a sudden, we seem to have all kinds of rumours of things changing. The people who live there, whom I know, are not happy about changes because they went there for a reason. To be in a privileged place without mains attributes, apart from electricity, is a wonderful privilege. To not have electric lights at night in the streets is phenomenal, and that's all part of the ecology of this place, and it's part of the feeling and the reason why we went there umpteen years ago now, although it will take another 50 years probably for us to be seen as locals. But that's the kind of fluctuating community that we have, in which we live. There has been very little consultation of any kind. We tend to get notices, none at all. Bradley, would you like to pick up from here? Bradley and I will just share this anyway.
I think what makes me angry and Adrian angry is this discourse that the Aramoana community thinks that this jetty is a wonderful, lovely idea. We live there and we don't. And our voices are sometimes heard because we make them so. But I just don't actually really know what the people of Aramoana actually think, because most of them don't actually want to get involved in this big argument that's happening in our community between this pro and anti-jetty. It's not doing our community any good. And it really worries me, because I can see, and I pick up what Adrian has said, that none of the people on the Aramoana Restoration Trust live at Aramoana. So I think there's that gulf as well.
Councillor Wiley.
What engagement has the group had with council and with the Wolf Trust?
We had a sit-down meeting with two of your staff, and then we had a meeting with the Restoration Trust as a charitable trust. That didn't involve the Aramoana community.
The meeting with staff, what was the feedback there, or what was the discussion?
The discussion was around whether there was any common ground between the groups to proceed with the jetty proposal, and whether our ideas towards the environment were going to be listened to. We had suggested that a full environmental impact be written. That hasn't happened. So through that process, in terms of protecting the environment and talking to the Aramoana community, nothing has come out of those discussions.
What about DOC?
We do have a very good working relationship with DOC, but in terms of the Aramoana jetty, they have to be very careful what they say and do. Our relationship with DOC is really based around, hey, there's a sick penguin, can Adrian please pick it up when it's half sleeting and snowing and bring it into us? And the answer is always yes. So we have a very practical, down-to-earth relationship with DOC. And we just think their time is better off spent protecting the treasures that live in the city, rather than having some circus of a concession process that's just going to waste their time and ratepayers' money.
Okay, so I've got a copy of the minutes from the meeting that you had last year, I think it was. And part of it says that DOC indicated that they thought, Doc said that the sea lions are happy to come in and when the wharf is there. Robin Thomas, previous regional manager, told them that if you formed a track through dunes, the sea lions would use it. Sea lions are not threatened by people or structures, that they'll cohabitate with others. You know,
I believe that was not Robin Thomas saying that. It was a member of the Arrowmina Restoration Trust. Am I correct?
The Wharf Trust has been told by Doc that the
Correct.
sea lions are happy. Yeah. And then it goes on to talk about the other areas. So I'm sort of confused in the sense of you're saying that if the wharf is restored, that will be ecological problems.
If the wharf is restored, this council needs to consider the knock-on effects that Doc has mentioned. The knock-on effects of what sort of jetty is it? How many people do you expect to come off the end of it? Are they going to have big parties? Are they going to have picnics? Are they going to walk around? Are they going to surf sail? What are they going to do? And who's ultimately going to take responsibility for that? Because the Restoration Trust is going to wind up after that jetty is built, and then the DCC will take ownership. I believe I'm right in that. If that's true, then who's going to look after the sea lions and the yellow-eyed penguins? The answer is me and Adrian in the middle of the night when we get a call from Doc, because Doc don't have the resources to manage that reserve. And councillor, it's your responsibility to tell Doc how you're going to manage that ecological area, because you made the decision to go ahead with that build, and you need to be telling us and Doc what it is that you're going to do to mitigate those negative effects, those knock-on effects of that area.
So the last 130 years or so of the jetty being there has had a harmful effect on the ecology of the area.
Now, the sea lions were not there when the jetty fell into disrepair. So while the jetty was in disrepair, the sea lions came back.
They weren't anywhere around. They weren't
This is becoming a discussion rather than a question. So are there any other questions? Councillor Elder.
It seems to me that further consultation needs to be had, but also it sounds like a management plan as well, you know, in the sense of you showed us the tracks in the salt marsh and stuff like that, and also injured penguins, etc. So could you see the future being more consultation and a management plan put around that area with everyone involved?
On May the 10th, 2015, Mike Morrison of DOC did send an email to council when he says that that is exactly what should actually happen. He talks about the effect of the knock-on effect, and an approach that help provide clarity is the idea of developing a community-led Arrowmina whole and site plan to capture the aspirations of the community. He suggested that in 2015. Sorry, none of your predecessors, to my knowledge, received that email.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your support. Our next submitter is speaking on the same subject, Janet Leddingham of Forest and Bird. Janet? Welcome. Sir Alan? All right.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, Mr Mayor and councillors, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. The concerns that Forest and Bird have with the proposal to rebuild the wharf to its original size are that it is likely to have an undesirable impact on the Arrowmina ecological area, a nationally and internationally ecological area of great importance. We wanted to be sure that the council is fully aware of the status and importance of it, and how it's become a very important patch for our endangered sea lions to haul out, especially in the last 10 years. As well as the salt marsh itself with its special vegetation and all the birds, some of them migrants that depend upon it, There are a number of other mammals that inhabit the beaches and sand dunes in the Spit area, such as the sea lions, occasional leopard seals and molting yellow-eyed penguins. They all come ashore for recovery after their demanding times foraging at sea. As many of you will know, our endangered sea lions had virtually disappeared from the Otago coast until 1993, when a sea lion female mum came up from the Auckland Islands and had a pup at Taieri Mouth in late 1993, the first one born here in over 150 years. Pretty much all of the sea lion pups born along the Otago coast are descended from mum. Specifically, the sea lions at Aramoana, checking with Doc on the rights of this, there have been occasional sightings at Aramoana since about 2000, usually solitary males until the 12th of January 2007, when a record was made that 5 male sea lions are on the Spit, including one branded as 108, which indicated come up from the Auckland Islands, as many of them do, the males. Then in 2007-8 season, pup Lena was born at Aramoana to a female, a descendant of mum's. BK was born there in 2010-2011, and Janet, who I followed intensively and was named after me, was born at the end of 2015, and I got to know her very, very well, going down there pretty much every day until Patty took her on a big swim round to the peninsula. The fact that the females are now visiting regularly makes Aramoana pretty important in the scheme of things, and we should be doing all we can to keep them coming, to find safe places to have their pups and for the males to sleep undisturbed. Watching sea lions from a safe distance can be very rewarding, it really is. I undertook to organise a record of sea lion sightings in the Spit Beach area from the end of August 2015, and what's flipping through here is a selection of those animals that we found there. As you see, some of them, like the jetty, they like to scratch their chins on that bit. This is female Nuki, who we think will probably have her first pup next year. She loves the place. But they've really taken over that area of the Spit Beach. And I'd like to acknowledge the help of the Aramoana people and residents of the Spit who've helped with this recording, and we're continuing this monitoring. Over that time, we've seen 204 animals. That's an undoubted underestimate, as we did not manage to check every day. And a copy of all those sightings has been sent to Jendi Patterson, as well as some of the pictures, because we really feel that that you need to think very hard about how you proceed from now on, and how if the wharf is built, can we stop the effects on the sea lions. Can we flip through to about the end, where there's a couple of text slides, please? The other point I'd like to make is that, yes, back there was an example of people getting too close, which is always one of the problems. One of the big boys that's frequently around. That last one was Patty coming back this year. We got hopeful, thought she was going to have another pup, but she chose otherwise and went over to the peninsula. This is another example of 2 English visitors who were getting far, far too close. And we need to proceed with education to stop this sort of thing happening. There could really be problems. Next one, please. This was a sighting from the Monarch of Patty and Pup, who were chasing up and down that area all day, being disturbed by a particularly large number of people, and the Monarch commented on it. And the fact that people really did need to respect them and keep their distance. And the next one, thanks. Can we see the top bit of that somehow? This was really worries me. John Davis in the ODT in 2012 commenting it could still be used for recreation, and with some thought it could be useful for tourism, he said. This could include using Pilot's Wharf as part of the harbour cycleway, using it as an access point to ferry cyclists across the Otago Peninsula side, thereby completing the loop. And the next one. Other way. We think the first priority has to be the Arapaimara ecological area. Protect the plants, birds and salt marsh. Damage to the mudflats and salt marsh from vehicle incursions could well increase with the new wharf in place. This protection includes the sea lion areas, Spit Beach, Pilot House Corner, the beaches and dunes where they rest, and the trees and shrub areas where mums and pups can hide. People get much enjoyment by watching from a safe distance. Organised tourism in the Arapaimara ecological area do not compute. We just don't think they mix together. It's a wonderful thing that these sea lions have come back, and we really do want to keep them there. Nobody wants to see the sea lions driven away by numbers of people and dogs embarking from boats right in their favourite haul-out area. Our coast is not abundant habitat for sea lions. We need to protect Arapaimara as a place where they can come, especially the breeding females. From the male's perspective, it gives them access to the upper harbour, which is a good feeding ground for them. And it is possible to fish from the shore. I see people doing it all the time, and wave to the cruise ships, and watch the sunset without a wharf in place. That happens now, and people down there really enjoy the walk down on the beach or on the salt marsh track. Thinking back, so that's the scotching of the smelter idea and the eventual designation of that Arapaimara ecological area was not just an Arapaimara community initiative. It involved a lot of academics, botanists, ecologists, who were able to point out those values and get the smelter stopped and that designation made. To the best of my knowledge, none of these people, there hasn't been wider consultation on the process about the wharf. And I think those of us, including me, who fought against the smelter way back, put money in towards the fight, and those academics and conservationists, they should have a chance to have a say in this as well. And Alan can probably enlarge on that. So finally, in your continuing deliberations on this matter, please do remember that we are the wildlife capital of the South, that DCC's made much of their new environmental policy, and please, please try and make sure that the wildlife has a good outcome, as does the Arapaimara ecological area. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Questions, councillors? Councillor?
Thank you for your very thorough presentation. I have a question, and I just want to preempt it with some statements before I get to my question. And I wanted to ask you that if the wharf was to be replaced like with like, had the same usage as before and didn't include tourism activity per se, because my understanding is that would require a special concession, and there were restrictions around vehicle access. Do you believe that the wildlife and humans could coexist in this space?
Well, the Monarch does a pretty good job now. The Monarch comes past every day, and they come in close and have a look. If there are sea lions there, they stop for a bit and people watch. So that's not getting out and disturbing the wildlife. These chaps really need their sleep. It's really important for them, the huge amount of energy they have to use in surviving. We think anything that decants large numbers of people onto a beach that has no facilities, and if somebody ducks into the sand dunes, they're quite likely to trip over a sleeping sea lion. All this sort of infrastructure. Some people have been tying up to the old jetty. Most of that, what I've seen, is reasonable behaviour. Some people still don't control their dogs properly, but a lot of people do. They respect them. But we're just worried about mass
So if you
ejections
took
onto
out,
the beach.
I guess my question is around, if you took out that mass groupings of people
Yes.
and had the same sort of attention to the wharf as before,
Yep.
in terms of numbers, do you believe the wildlife and humans could coexist in that space?
I have my doubts. I think we might find, especially the females, not coming anymore.
Thank you.
Councillor Laufisa.
Thank you, Mayor Cole. Thank you for your time and presentation, Janet. If it was up to you solely, would you rebuild the jetty?
No.
Thank you.
I think it's great now. People could still tie up to the piles with a little boat if they want to fish just off the shore. Nothing to stop them doing that.
Thanks.
No further questions? Sir Allen.
Kia ora tātou, and thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors. I'll just add a little bit about the designation ecological area. This was a decision of the Department of Conservation when the land was finally vested in them after quite a wide and extended consultation. It was considered the appropriate category, many available. It was a Forest Service category for areas of special ecological value that had both important functional ecosystems and plant and animal communities that were combined to a very unique and productive system. So Aramoana on vegetation grounds has a full sequence of salt marsh up to the non-tidal area through the shrub zone and so on. There are no significant weeds there. It's pretty natural. And it's got a fauna that's incomparable in Otago, a wide range of waterfowl, plus the sea lions you've heard about. So when it was finally opened by Dennis Marshall in 1994, it was agreed that this was a really special area, and ecological areas are particularly to be managed in their natural state. Recognising the values at Aramoana and the limited opportunity the public had to appreciate that, when I was chair of the local branch of Forest and Bird, we funded through the Marjorie Barclay Trust a boardwalk out into the middle of the salt marsh, coming out of the domain. That was to provide an opportunity for the interested public through an interpretation walk and out into the salt marsh, where they could really get into the salt marsh without disturbing it physically, without disturbing it in terms of their presence, and appreciate the wildlife there. And the sea lions are really dependent on a minimum disturbance, a lack of disturbance. As Janet has said, the monarch provides a good opportunity to see them, but viewed from the land, it's inappropriate. You can't fail but to disturb them. So, Aramoana is a functional ecosystem, unique in Otago. In fact, when Lands and Survey did a national survey of coastal areas, they ranked Aramoana as nationally significant. And when the aluminium smelter came along, Sir Hugh Fletcher, who was a person involved in the negotiation, was convinced of the values of the salt marsh, and in the smelter proposal they designated the salt marsh a wildlife sanctuary. And that was partly the reason that it was finally appreciated as having real value, so that when it went through a planning tribunal following the failure of the smelter, the planning tribunal recommended that it remain recognised for its natural state, and then it was vested in the Department of Conservation. So it is very special. It requires a natural approach, minimum human disturbance, and that's what the boardwalk provides, and that's what the monarch provides. But I don't believe the jetty, which will attract people along the edge of the salt marsh, and we've had real trouble there recently, and the Department of Conservation have been trying to restrict human intrusion with vehicles, particularly churning up the salt marsh. And the wharf at the end of the spit there will just, to my way of thinking, encourage more visitation, which is inappropriate to that area of very special importance, an area that can be offer interpretation with the boardwalk and appreciation of the sea lions from the ocean. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Sir Alan. Questions, councillors? And we've exhausted the questions. Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Okay, councillors, that's the conclusion of public forum. We'll move on now to apologies. We have only one apology for a possible early departure from Councillor Wilson. I'll move that apology be accepted. Second to Councillor Staines. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Yes, carried. And then on to the confirmation of the agenda. I'll move from the Chair, second to Councillor Staines, that the agenda as published be confirmed. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. The declaration of interest, and I note there are recommendations, so I'll move from the Chair the two recommendations that we note or amend the necessary elected members' interest register and confirm the proposed management plan for elected members. Second to Councillor Staines. Is there any discussion on that? There being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. On to the confirmation of minutes. I'll move from the Chair that Council confirms the public part of the minutes of the ordinary Council meeting held on the 6th of December 2016 as a correct record. Second to Councillor Staines. Any discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And I'll move the next one. So I'll move the Chair that the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the 12th of December. Second to Councillor Staines. All those, any discussion? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And on to I'll move that the Council meeting minutes of the 23rd of January be confirmed. Second to Councillor Wiley. Any discussion? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Right, on to the minutes of the community boards, the Waikuaiti. Sorry, Councillor Wiley.
Can I suggest, can we move them all in one go, as per
Would you like
Councillor Noon's previous?
If you'd like to move them. And is there a seconder for Councillor Vandevus? Is there any discussion on that, since we're moving them in a block? There is none. Put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Reports, item 11, the Botanic Garden Town Belt Reserve proposed easement to Chorus. Who's dealing with that?
Happy to move option 1.
Now, would you like to lead off with anything? Any questions, councillors, on the report on page 89?
Good report, willing to move.
Sorry?
I said it's a good report, I'm willing to move option 1.
Right. Second. Moved Councillor Lord, seconded Councillor Wilson. Is there any, the no questions? Is there any discussion? Do you wish to speak to a Councillor Lord?
Happy to vote.
There's no discussion. I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. On to item 12. Annual plan final budget options. Page 100. Welcome. Does that work? So, Chief.
Look, apologies, Gavin's on leave and we had Carolyn Pretford step in to answer your questions on this, but she's sick, so unfortunately you've got me. So, I mean, you see the options in there. We have, in the investment fund, we'd put $280,000 for what might be unexpected maintenance in and around this building. In the short term, we propose to take 200,000 out of that so that we can allocate it to this project. We are pretty confident that by May we will in fact have interest savings that will be able to be allocated to whatever purpose you want, including putting this back in if you need, or to debt repayment or whatever else you choose when we have that May round.
Councillor Hawkins, you've got a question or do you wish to move?
I'm happy to move when the...
Happy to move. Okay, thanks. And second, Councillor Stain. So I'll come back to you when we've exhausted questions. Are there any questions, Councillor Law?
Yeah, my question is for you. So I'm just asking about that 280,000. Is that all the money you've got in that account, or is that just set aside for? The way you said it, then you made it sound like it was set aside for something separate for normal maintenance.
This was for we know that we have got some work underway to address the food maintenance issues or just required maintenance issues in the civic building, and so this was in case anything came up in the short term while we were doing that work. That work's still underway, so by May we'll have a formal proposal as to whether we can replace that. The investment account has also been used. You were advised during the annual plan process to put money aside for what we knew were going to be extra staffing that were going to be needed in order to roll out we're stepping up the investment in maintenance, particularly in water and waste, and so we did have other funding, but it's separate for an additional half dozen staff, which we briefed you about during the annual plan time, and that process is underway.
Slightly off the subject of food resilience and Aratoi, but slightly off the subject of food resilience and Aratoi, does the money that's in that account, that, in my opinion, I'm asking, but would that go any way to significantly do anything in this building? I would imagine we would have far greater requirements than 280,000.
Yeah, there's a ground up piece of work underway to determine the full maintenance requirements, and they are substantial. There is windows replacement and quite a lot of things that are needed in the building. We don't tend to spend money on our building for staff and councillors until it's necessary, and it is becoming necessary, as you're aware.
And at some point in the future, you would expect to need a lot more than that.
During the long-term plan that'll be discussed, we would expect to need a substantial amount of money for that work.
Councillor Wiley.
So this won't affect any maintenance in the effect of the city in any way?
No, this is a little bit risk averse. We are confident that in fact we know now, which with more certainty than we did even when this was drafted, that we will have interest savings. So we will be able to put some options to you in the May report about what we do with those interest savings, including replenishing this for the unexpected maintenance requirements.
So the public, after reading this morning's ODT and seeing and believing that all of a sudden we were taking 200,000 out of maintenance and moving it across, is actually not quite the case.
This was for unexpected maintenance. This was $280,000 for unexpected, for things that might just arise. As I say, by May we are pretty certain that if we think we're still going to need that, we will be able to put that in for the coming year because out of the interest savings. But in the short term, this was felt to be a suitable holding pattern.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Okay, Councillor Hawkins, do you wish to speak to this? You've moved.
Yeah, it's probably... I just note that Councillor Stain seconded it before he'd read it, so he may no longer be happy with that.
Sorry?
It's not as outlined on the order paper.
Oh,
circulated it separately, sorry.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you were moving the recommendation. So perhaps you should speak to it and explain how it differs from the recommendation.
Yeah, sure. So the intention of the paper in front of us is to suggest that we can accommodate resourcing both the environment strategy work and the food resilience work out of existing budgets, and therefore not trigger public consultation on our annual plan. Now, I'll argue that we should be doing that anyway, but that's for a subsequent paper. This resolution, as drafted, acknowledges that the degree of confidence staff have will increase the closer we get to the end of this current financial year. So in May we'll have a better understanding of what our likely income and expenditure will be for this current year, and therefore how much of that can be used to accommodate this work carried forward into 2017-2018. It also allows for the public, and this was the intention of the motion moved in the January budget meeting, it gives us the option to have a conversation with our community about what their appetite is for potentially increasing that. So initially those were options of 150,000 or 200,000 as were presented in that paper during the January meeting. This would put 150k into the draft annual plan budget for 17-18, and then ask people if there is an appetite for increasing that. If we don't consult on it, we run the risk of, should we get closer to the end of this financial year and we realise that budgets are tighter than we currently anticipate, we won't have had the opportunity to get feedback on how important this is to our community when we get to the point of balancing those priorities through the deliberations in May. I still want to have that conversation through the public engagement plan, but as I said, we'll deal with that in the next report. This just provides the platform for that conversation. Thanks.
Further speakers? You're happy to second that? So you retain the seconder.
Can I just check the 50,000 will still come out of this $280,000 budget? It makes sense. I've just been advised by Ruth we've got $3.8 million in that budget for next year, so we're pretty confident that losing 50,000 out of it is for the unplanned maintenance, that we'll be able to meet those costs even if the interest savings don't come.
Further speakers? Okay, there are none. I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No. Recorded, please.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to the community engagement for the annual plan, page 105. Andy, are you taking three?
No, I want to take.
So do you want to preface this with any comments, Sandy?
No, I think it's pretty straightforward.
So I'll just throw the questions for a start. Councillor Hawkins.
I think again.
Sorry?
I'm happy to move when the questions have been exhausted.
So,
Draft something and I'll circulate it now.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. You're drafting something else, or is it?
I'm sending it around now, but when you've exhausted questions, I'm happy to.
Right. Okay. You're going to move something which will be enlightened about as you produce it. That's great. Questions, Councillor Laufiso.
Thank you. Can I just ask why formal hearings are not included in the recommended option?
When we assessed all of the various forms of community engagement that were being proposed in the recommended option, we didn't think that formal hearings added anything to that, and we also thought that the recommended option meant that feedback that was received from councillors in any form had a greater likelihood of having equal weight, because sometimes in a hearing process that seems to carry more weight. But that was just the staff view when we assessed the options.
Can I just ask, I think the hearings time frame was close to impossible to meet at one point when I talked to Jane, is it true? Is that, can you just advise on that? Whether we actually have the time between now and June to schedule hearing that before SCP?
We can still, we can do hearings outside of an SCP, so that if a hearings option is chosen today, it would be a non-SCP hearing, so it would be a slightly shorter consultation period than you would for an SCP, but the hearings would still take place, they just wouldn't be SCP mandated.
Further questions? Councillor Gary.
I just wanted to ask about the time frame for putting this in place, because I was surprised at the length of time suggested towards the end of the year. Do you want to comment on? Are you able to comment on that at all?
I'm
Sorry, I just don't understand the question.
I believe that I read that it was going to take till the end of the year to get some framework around these such that we're ready to go out and talk to people. Perhaps I got that wrong.
No, the plan is for the annual plan part of the consultation. The recommended option will be in place and delivered in March, April, May. But then some of the next steps will take till the end of the year and be lined up with the LTP consultation.
Ah, sorry, thank you for that clarification.
I'm sorry if that wasn't clear in the report.
Right. If there are no more questions, Councillor Hawkins. Is it? Is this it?
I think so.
We'll just.
I've got a copy and paste. Thanks, Paul.
Right. So, do you wish to speak to this? Have you got a seconder? Is there a seconder for this? Councillor Lafiso? Right. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Hawkins?
I do, thank you. I think regardless of the changes to the legislation that enables us to consult with our community less, I don't think we do our community any service by taking up that option. We've hardly showered ourselves in glory in this regard, communication that is, in recent years, which is why we need to do more rather than less. To that end, I applaud the efforts that are being taken to do things a little differently in terms of how we engage with our community, but I don't think that's a strong enough reason to stop what we have been doing up until this point traditionally. The draft annual plan remains the best opportunity that our community have to come to speak to this body and share their concerns and aspirations for our community. I acknowledge that it doesn't suit everyone, and that's why it's fantastic that we're looking at other options. But I don't think, I think we run the risk of throwing the baby out with the bathwater if we do away with having a hearings process, regardless of whether it's a special consultative procedure or not. I think it's a platform that is cherished by our community, and they deserve to see that continue. I resent the suggestion in the paper that having a formal hearings process presents us with an inequitable way of consulting with our community, and that somehow I would give more weight to someone coming and speaking in person than I would a written submission. Some people may have that attitude, but I certainly don't, and I would certainly hope that the majority of us would give equal weight to any feedback we get through this public engagement process, regardless of the form that it takes. Finally, while I accept the intent of trying to open the scope of these proceedings to allow elected members to run their own consultations, I think we run a serious risk to the integrity of the process as a whole by going down that route, not through any malicious intent, but just because I don't think we're qualified to answer I certainly don't feel qualified to answer the breadth of questions that might come from our public in that kind of forum in the way that officers would be able to. And that's the intent really of D, in that any face-to-face engagement that has taken place and that feeds into this process is conducted with the support of staff present. I understand that there are resourcing implications for that, and that may mean that we can't take up all of the menu of engagement options that have been presented to us, but I don't think we have we don't have to have that conversation today in terms of the specifics of what does and doesn't fly with the requirement of staff support, whether that's for advice or secretarial purposes. But I do think it's important to commit to this as a principle to guide our public engagement plan in all of its forms. I'm looking forward to getting feedback from our community, as I always am at this time of the year, and to having them come and speak to us and address us, as has been the fashion through our annual hearings process. Thank you.
I'm going to suggest that we have a brief adjournment, and the reason for that is some of the implications before, the implications of some of these are not completely clear, and I want council to be in a position to make an informed decision when we make it. So I move to the chair that we have a 10-minute adjournment, sending council stains. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes, carried. And I will ask the government's manager to just, when we come back, just to give us a few pointers on what the implications of each of these is. Councillors, we'll get underway. Can I ask Ms Graham to just go through the resolution as it's presented and explain a few of the implications and maybe choices that each clause presents?
Certainly, and thank you, Your Worship, for time to adjourn and consider these things. Resolution A is as per the order paper, and there are nothing there for us. B, the resolution to hold formal hearings is fine. The planning allows for that, but the councillors just need to be mindful that there's a large administrative cost to running the hearings in terms of the times, the time of the GSOs and the back end, but the timetable provides for that.
Actually, more than that, the cost in hearings is more that we receive submissions, that the submissions get sent to staff, that staff read the submissions, decide if it's in the budget, out of the budget or in the scope of the budget, make a recommendation about whether you should consider, write a recommendation back to you, and that all then gets compiled for the online. So that's kind of a little bit of the work. So it's just background work to be aware of.
And it might be that we come to you with a slightly different way of approaching submissions for hearings this year. We have had some thoughts around that, and it might be that there are some efficiencies we can make around that. But we haven't fully thought through our ideas around that because we weren't sure if you were going to have move to have hearings or not. Then moving on to the menu of engagement options, and they are paragraph 24 of the report on page 109, and it would be helpful if it's okay with you, Your Worship, if we just work through the A to G and outline the challenges with some of them and just some issues that councillors might need to be aware, and then potentially get a steer of which of those council might wish to add in at this point.
And I would appreciate, I think, some kind of steer. My sense, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my sense is that if we're not in a position to resource all of the options, whether it's hearings and all the others or not. So what I'd appreciate is just some kind of cost. If we had this, it might be easy to resource the other.
So option A, the city conversation.
Excuse me, Councillor Hawkins, you...
Sorry, just a question about that in terms of the process of handling this. I don't know how constructive it would be having the discussion now about which of these things are included and which of them aren't. I'm happy to have them explained, but I'm also happy to amend C to allow, because I mean the intention of C wasn't that we do everything, just that we're comfortable with those options. And acknowledging that D would have made a difference to which of those options got taken up, and I didn't expect staff to be able to respond to that immediately. So if it's helpful to change C to be something a little more enabling of that menu of options, then I'm happy to do that, if that would...
I think my other point, though, Councillor Hawkins, was that the inclusion of B has implications for what options might be able to be, what other options might be able to be resourced. That's what I'm...
Sure. I just don't know how detailed the responses to that will be at this point. So.
And an enabling resolution might be helpful, potentially, that says approves a selection of engagement options from the menu presented by staff, but that's an option. But I'm happy just to work through what we've been able to explain in slightly more detail about the menu, and then, if that's all right with you, Your Worship. Okay, so A, the city conversation, the staff advises that largely duplicates hearings, and given in that menu of options we weren't proposing hearings, and it's likely that the targets of that conversation would have been the same people who are likely to present at hearings. It's just something, so given that you're having hearings, that is likely to duplicate time and resource, and also not add any, not engage with people that you weren't otherwise reaching. The Councillor Kappa seems fine. The Hui, we're meeting with Māori Participation Working Party next week, and so that is able to be accommodated. Community board forums, a formal mechanism, and again, that's able to be managed. The farmers market stand is fine. Councillors need to be aware that we can only have one stand all year as council, so were we to choose to engage on the annual plan at the farmers market, that's our one time for the year to use that stand. And then Neighbours Day, and so F and G, Neighbours Day and the high school, those present slightly more challenges around resourcing, but we could potentially on Neighbours Day, for example, support councillors who wanted to do that with information material and use it as an information kind of sharing mechanism rather than necessarily a true engagement mechanism where we had a resource where people could fill in, or you'd simply provided people with information on what was happening and how they did get to feed into that process rather than collecting submissions directly there. And the same, the high school one, that would test staff resources, but we could look at that. We just would need to flesh out what that would be.
Can I just ask, when I suggested that, and that came out of work I did prior to the election, that was more about providing information about how, just to engage the young people, and that was certainly targeted at Year 13 who would be voters. So I'm just trying to work out, the question I have is what staff resources would be
involved? Depending on the nature of the engagement, you have the option of D up there, which says that
well, if you put D aside, if you put D aside for just a moment, what staff resources would be involved?
Hardly any, but you would still need, generally if you weren't having support staff, then councillors could attend school things and provide information to students, and we could provide the physical collateral for councillors to hand out if they wanted physical resources.
The issue becomes, of course, if you're asked questions like, so how much debt does the council have, or how much are you spending on water, and without staff there, you'll most likely know the answer to some of those questions, but not necessarily all of them. So,
what I suggest the questions are more likely to be around how do we make submissions of ours.
Further questions? Councillor O'Malley. Now, can I remind people that standing orders require us to stand?
Not good standing for nothing.
They are not.
Unless we change them, of course.
I look at this menu and think that in terms of some of your concerns, I don't think they were very practical. There'd be actual substitutions for any of the hearings, but they might make a great opportunity for you to explain the process of the annual plan, especially when it fits into the context of the long-term plan, and in doing so encourage people to actually then make submissions to the more formal component of the consulting period. And I look really at the community boards there as one very good opportunity because of their already high access to their communities. And again, I think the high schools would be kind of opportunities in different places where you tell them about the plan concept. Don't answer questions in terms of how much money you're putting into every budget, but to say, in fact, that's where you get, if you want to get those answers, come to the actual more formal hearings.
Now, we may...
Sorry, that was a question. Is that a good idea?
Can I point out, Councillor O'Malley, that the previous incumbent of that particular seat was an expert at those kind of questions. Obviously, it's rubbed off. Are there any further questions before we go on to full discussion?
Can I just point out we changed your resolution D, Councillor Hawkins, to say agrees any face-to-face engagement about the annual plan because we thought you probably didn't want to restrict councillors for engaging on any topic whatsoever in their lives.
So we're still in questions. Councillor Elder, do you have a question? And then Councillor Wilson.
I was just wondering about option D, face-to-face, when we're giving information and whether we need that there.
Well, I think that's a point for when we discuss, for discussion, because I don't know that the staff can give an answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, Your Worship, I'm just asking, I don't want to be part of this debate or questioning because it's going to preclude me potentially later on, but I'm just wanting to ask a technical question because I thought under the new option A in Standing Orders 20.1, I think it is, gosh, I sound boring, but I have read them, that a mover can no longer amend the motion. Do you aware of that, Sandy? It's something, and I just want to make sure that, and that's why I'm going to stand back to move. I don't mind moving an amendment later, but
Christine can give advice, but this had been a reasonably fluid process, I would have thought, and with the leave of the meeting you could.
I don't know that we've got the leave of the meeting. It has to be done at the confirmation of the agenda and understanding orders. That's what I, as chair of ISCOM, I this last week.
Now, I'm not sure if I understand your point completely.
But it hasn't been amended.
I understand it. It's if a notice of motion is brought to the meeting beforehand.
It's not my notice of motion. It's in the. We changed the standing orders. It's not a notice of motion that we've got options A, B, and C under. I think it's.
And we do
20,
A.
and that we adopt option A, 21. And we adopt option A, which means that you can't amend motions.
This isn't an amended motion.
Hang on.
Sorry, it was intimated that it was going to be potentially changed by the mover, that's all. Yes, and that's what I'm just pointing out, that it's... Yeah, but I'm just checking that that is the case if it is option A under 21.2. I'm sorry, it's something that I tried to raise at ISCOM the other day.
For the benefit of the meeting, we need this explained. So, Christy, could you perhaps explain the implications of what Councillor Wilson has brought to our attention?
Yes, I think the simplest thing to do would be to read out what paragraph 21.2 states. So, this council has adopted the general procedure under option A, and that provides for the mover and seconder of a motion cannot move or second an amendment. And that doesn't apply when the mover or seconder of a motion wants to amend an item in a report. In this case, the mover or seconder may also propose or second the suggested amendment. So if it's about a report, that can be moved or amended, but when it's about a motion, it can't be, which I agree is an awkward way of expressing it in standing orders, but that's what they provide.
I may be a bit slow, but I'm suspect I'm not alone. I don't have any idea about what this is about.
Sorry, Your Worship, again, because I've been pedantic enough to read these. It is something we're going to have to get used to. When we confirm the agenda, we by default choose option A, which means that we've got a higher standard or a more difficult standard to get through in the process of amending motions. You can choose at the start of a meeting to choose option C, I think, which is the easiest one to amend.
Look, I think the simple way of approaching it is to understand that there's standing orders are changing who can do negotiation about what goes into a motion. Previously, we had a practice where the council provided for that by a debate or changes agreed between the mover and the seconder. Standing orders are now saying that it has to be someone different. It can't be the mover or a seconder. It has to be someone different in the meeting.
Why do we agree with that?
We did agree to that.
I know, but why?
So what Councillor Wilson is explaining is if that's not a procedure you want to follow, you can change it at any meeting you wish, and you do that at the commencement of the meeting at the time that the agenda is.
So, Christy, could you just tell us what the implications are for this? Because this has been changed by the mover and seconder.
So someone else,
what are the implications now?
Someone else needs to propose that amendment who is not the mover, who is not the seconder, and who has not spoken to the motion.
And, well, no one's spoken to the motion yet, so that's fine. And I take it, just to be clear, that the amendment was in D, is that right?
No, look, it was staff added that in, so technically, yeah, I don't believe it's been amended necessarily by the meeting. Look, it'll be...
No, look, I'm not going to accept that. The fact is that I overheard you say to the mover, this has been changed, are you happy with it? And he was. So he has moved, he has changed it. So I need to know, to make the process robust, what our options are now.
So someone different to the mover and the seconder needs to propose that amendment.
Councillor Benson-Pope.
Except that, and that maybe needs further response, he hasn't moved or seconded an amendment. There was a suggestion that he made that he was happy to accommodate a concern that was expressed, and the wording has been changed, and our standing orders, whichever option we choose, are silent on the question of the leave of the meeting to do what has become our normal procedure. So I think it's sweet, actually.
So you're making the point, Councillor Benson-Pope, that this isn't an amendment as such.
He didn't move anything, seconded anything.
Right. That is a distinction I'm prepared to accept. In that case, my ruling is that it stands as it is. Now, we're up to Councillor Lord. We're still in questions.
Yeah, I was just going to say, will you be taking I shouldn't say A, should I? No. Will you be taking these in parts? Because I don't want to vote for option.
I'm happy to take them in parts. Yeah, that was my intention. So
the other question was, is it now the appropriate time to say that should this fail, I would move option 1?
Do you mean the recommended? Yeah, that's fine. You're foreshadowing. Yeah. That's fine. Yeah. Right. Councillor Wiley, you have a question.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sandy, can you just clarify paragraph 26 on page 110?
I'm just checking, so just that there is no longer a formal requirement to have an SCP as part of your annual plan process?
Yep.
That the changes in the Local Government Act, was it last year before? 2 years ago? Changed the requirements around a special consultative procedure for annual plans, meaning that hearings and an SCP were no longer required.
Okay.
Yeah, unless there was a significant or material change.
And so when we look at the annual plan, is that why staff suggested that we don't have the formal hearing process?
Correct, because there is no significant or material change to the draft annual plan as it's been proposed.
Okay. If we did proceed with a formal hearing as in B, is there a process where only the issues as part of the annual plan can be presented so we don't hear about some of the peripheral issues that the community has and they use that opportunity at a different time or different place?
No, the councillors would need to hear anyone who had elected to come to be heard on whatever matter.
And that is what happened last year. You remember we did try and steer it in the direction to just changes in the annual plan, but that's quite hard.
Okay. Can you just clarify for the community, because I can hear arguments around the community that council don't want to listen to the community this year and things like that. What other opportunities there are for the community to come and present to us?
Do you want to talk about some of them? There are multiple opportunities. So as part of the annual plan, within the options, it was about letting the community know what was coming up in the LTP and how, if they had a good idea for something or a real concern about something that wasn't in the draft budgets, how they could then feed that through into the process. But also any submission or feedback that we got as part of the what was outlined in the report would have been consolidated and provided to councillors when you have your deliberations. Because even though the options included no hearings, that didn't mean that councillors wouldn't get all of the feedback with staff advice around that and how it fitted with the annual plan, and then there are still deliberations, so anything still got to be considered by the councillors. There was just not that formal face-to-face hearing, although there were other face-to-face options presented. And after the annual plan and the lead up to the LTP, there are a range of things that we're consulting on with the community at the moment.
And then the community also has the opportunity, like we heard earlier, a public forum at this meeting and at the other committee meetings we hold as well.
Mm-hmm. And then there's public art framework we're consulting on. There will be bylaw consultations, there will be destination plan, there is the LTP, there is a range of consultations going on, and we are always a little bit mindful of consultation fatigue, so we just need to try and balance up everything that we've got going on with the community to try and ensure that we are able to engage with people on the issues that affect them.
Okay. So then, because when we look at engagement with the community, and the community presented written in their submission, and many of us, when we were residents, before we became a council, we did submit to annual plan. You know, the same weight is given in the sense of reading everybody's presentations prior to or applications to the annual plan as what they do when they present it. I'd like to think that's what everybody believes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. Are there any further questions? Right. Now we're going to. I'll start now with discussion. So, Councillor Hawkins.
I've already spoken.
You've already spoken. So, the further speakers. Councillor Law.
Yeah, look, I would just say I can't. Well, I don't want. I won't say I can't. I won't. I don't want to support option B. So therefore, I'll vote against that. In fact, I think I will vote just against it, and I'll subsequently be willing to move the recommended option. But the reasons for that are not that I don't want to consult with our community, but I do think largely we don't have a large pile of money to give away. It's not going to be a money scramble. Not that it should ever be a money scramble based on that. But I think there are many other ways we can engage and consult with our community, and much as it was poo-hooed at one of our previous meetings, even going and meeting like we did in the front of the supermarkets and that, I find quite a successful way of getting the feel of what people want. And we're still going to be open to written submissions, so anyone at any time can write something in. They just won't be able to have the chance to come to a hearing, so I'm actually quite relaxed about that. And I'm not sure if it was the last hearings, but we had quite a lot of time when people that said they were going to come then didn't turn up, and it wastes a lot of our time and staff time. So I'm happy to, in view of that, like we say, it is very minor. There's no significant change for that long-term planning. There's really no need.
Yep. Can I just note before we come to the next speaker, picking up on your foreshadowing intention, Councillor Lord, you will note that A is the same as A in the recommendation, and the decision on each of B, C and D will actually determine, I'm not sure what else you would foreshadow actually, because they will be decided on the vote, but I'm open to a foreshadowed motion if it's materially different from. So, further speakers. Councillor Stein.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think we have a great opportunity here to try something different. This is the second plan on which we have had the option of not holding formal hearings. I don't think that leaving out the formal hearing this time is going to be detrimental to finding out what we want to from our community. More, I think it's going to give us the opportunity, with some of the suggested forms of engagement, to get an even better idea of how we communicate with our community. I've been on council long enough, I think, to know that predominantly you see a large number of the same faces when you hold a formal hearing. Most of those people read the submission which they wrote that you've already read. And I think, while not everybody will agree, those who turn up and speak in the formal hearing do get extra weight. And the reason for that is that they're the last person in your ear before you enter the debate of the final plan. So I'd like to think that we try. There's a lot of our community who would never turn up to speak formally. They won't. We get, if we used our submissions to tell us about that, we would say 2/3 of the community or more don't want to turn up in front of a formal hearing, just by the size of the folders we get. So I think we do hear, if we've got written submissions coming in, we're hearing from those that wish to write. I think we want to try really hard to get a conversation going with the people who don't write in and will not write in, who will not come and speak to us formally, but who, in a more relaxed setting, can express their views or even be in a discussion prompted to give their views to us so we have a better understanding. So I think it's the right time to do it. We've got a plan which has no significant changes. As Councillor Lord pointed out, it isn't as though we've got a bucket of money that's looking for somewhere to be spent. We've got a very tight budget this time round. I think let's try and engage and hear the community in different ways. It's not that we're not trying to listen to them, but let's not complicate it with this time with the formal hearings. We will have those in 12 months' time.
Councillor Elder.
I have to agree in sentiment to Chris, because in fact there are huge amounts of the community who feel disempowered and feel very scared to speak. The community boards have a really great opportunity to engage, but also to indicate, I think it would be really good to indicate the difference between the annual plan and the long-term plan, and how in the near future they've got far more ability to contribute and put their ideas forward going forward into the long-term plan. I don't know whether D there, where it says that support staff need to be present in informal situations. I don't know whether staff could be present all the time. I think that's a bit impossible, so I don't know how we do that.
Councillor O'Malley.
I just think that we have to make sure that we're presenting to the community that we are truly listening to them. And I know that people will say that the formal hearing system is inefficient and has very poor turnout, but I'm worried that by taking it off the table, we have preempted something and will be perceived as not fulfilling our democratic responsibility. I believe one way to test whether Councillor Staines' observation, well, not whether it's accurate or not, but the veracity of it, would be if we do the community engagement identified in Part C, and then nobody turns up to the formal hearing, then we've got the numbers to show that people actually don't want to turn up. But I suspect that once we do Part C, we may see an increase of people turning up to the formal.
Any further speakers? Councillor White.
I just want to elaborate a little bit further on what I asked in questions. I think that the key is that we are not taking away the right for the community to come and speak to us. There are many, many options for that to happen, and whether it's public forums, community boards, and some of the other suggestions there, that's going to be important. The one thing that I found when I presented, and I've presented twice, it's a daunting process. And from from the last 3 years listening through, especially just the annual plans, 70% of the same faces. You know what? I don't know. Everybody may have a better attention span than me, but I tune off sometimes. But the other side of that is that next year is the long-term plan. That's where the community does need full engagement. That's where they really want to come and talk to us, which is going to be important. I actually think, even for some of you that may be sitting on the fence about what's been suggested here in the papers versus what's up on the board, is let's give something different a go to see if we get better engagement. Let's not keep doing the same thing to expect different results. So we're not saying to the community, no, we don't want to engage with you. We're saying to the community, we want to engage more effectively with you. And that's the message that I would like to get out there to them. So, sorry, I won't be supporting in B, but I will be looking at the menu of engagement options. And I do agree, actually, it is important if we're going to set up some coffee mornings or councillor cuppers or community board forums, or I do think the market, farmers market stands is important and things like that, that staff are present, because that does actually help in some contexts. So thank you.
Councillor Laufisa.
Thank you for the opportunity. I applaud the previous speakers in terms of their wanting to clearly ensure that we effectively engage with the community. And I echo Councillor O'Malley's sentiments about a fear that we haven't got our communications with our public right yet. I just want to acknowledge the context in which we ourselves were put in place here through a very formal process and through decades of lack of resources put into voter education. We don't get the participation from people every 3 years, and we need to be making steps to, I believe, throughout this triennium of actually encouraging voter participation. And that, I believe, starts with the responsibility of our formal hearings, because we're here as a result of a formal process, and we just need to have a wider range of options available. That's why I would stick with the basis of formal hearings. It's not about money or how much we have to spend. It's about that continual dialogue with the community and our voters. Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
I've listened very carefully to what my colleagues have said, and the first thing I'd like to do is thank the staff for listening very carefully to us about the possibility. And I've gone back and forward around annual plan hearings, and as with many of my colleagues, I've been on the other side of it and have presented at those hearings. The conclusion I've arrived at is that, and I'm really heartened that the theme coming through is about more effective community engagement and how we do that. And my belief is that if we're going to do things differently, then we need to be really clear about that. And if we do the annual plan, hold the annual plan hearings, the formal ones as well, I think it will water down somewhat the new ways of doing this in community engagement. I think the most important thing we need to recognise is first that many in our community don't even know what our annual plan or a long-term plan is. That's the first problem we've got. And I think the other thing is we need to go to where people are rather than them coming to us. I would concur with Councillor Staines' comments around while everyone tries to listen very carefully to both the written and the people who come to the hearing, the reality is, as you said, Councillor Staines, that it's what you hear last that you remember. And so it's always been my view that you need to come and be heard. So I will be coming down on the side of trying something new, going to where people are, and not doing the formal hearings this time, to indicate that we want to do things differently and we want to engage with our community more effectively.
Councillor Wilson.
I just actually concur with Councillor Gary. They're my views. I have to say that I have had the pleasure of sitting on formal hearings for a number of years, and it is one of my favourite times of the year. It is a time where you're reading the submissions and you get a really good view of the city, but the process in the government has changed the options and their expectations of the councils. I think we have to look at how we can do the consultation most effectively for the community, and actually we have to try something new. Now, if we go along with the formal hearings, I don't know that we will have tried something new. And given that it is the third year of an LTP and there is less room for manoeuvring, but an opportunity of setting up a really good platform for change in the LTP, I think that break from having formal hearings will be a really good learning for the community. I hope that we'll all be engaged in the process and put in as many hours, but out in the field, as we put in through the formal hearings, and I'm quite excited by the potential that that gives. So I will regret it. Having said that, I'm fairly full on formal hearings at the moment, and it would be a very nice change to be getting out in the field and not doing them. So I think that I would be voting just for a trial for this year without not having B, which is the hearings.
To the speakers. Okay, I just want to make a couple of points myself. Can I say that it's not about, for me, it's not about the fact that we do get the same people most years. That doesn't bother me, because they are the people that care, and they're the people that have an opinion, and that's fine. To me, it's not about not listening, it's about hearing. And I concur with those I concur with everyone around the table. We all want to hear more effectively. We all want to be listening more effectively to what our community is saying. And in this instance, because there has been no change from the LTP into this annual plan, well, I have sat and listened to what the people in our community who care say about the proposals in here. I've heard them already, and I know what they want. And I think that if we're going to try anything different, then this is the safest year to try it, because nothing has changed in the annual plan. It would be, I agree that it would be risky to change it in a year where there was a bit of change, and I know that legislatively that would put us in a position where we might be starting to contradict the Act. But nonetheless, nothing has changed. If we're going to try something new, this is the least risky time to do it and give it a crack. And if that's the way Council decides, then I commend us and staff to giving it the best shot we have with the most innovative alternatives that we can possibly come up with. Councillor Hawkins, do you wish to exercise your right of reply?
Yeah, thank you. Just a few points. I think it's probably worth stressing that we can use both the hearings process and do things differently. These are mutually exclusive, and it's the entire intention of this motion to enable us to do that. Going through a formal hearing process doesn't stop us doing that. We can and should do both, and voting against this motion is voting to limit the options that the people in our community have to come and talk to us about things that are important to them, rather than come and talk to us about the things that we've decided are important for them. We've heard that we want to do things differently to capture people who aren't necessarily as comfortable with that process, and I applaud that search for the silent majority. But for a number of people, this is the process with which they are most comfortable with engaging with this institution. So by saying we're not going to do that anymore, in search of new engagement methods to capture people who aren't comfortable doing that, we're essentially excluding all of those people who the Mayor has said perhaps care more passionately about the future of the city than the average, and I think that would be a real missed opportunity. It does concern me that people necessarily agree with the last thing that they've heard, although as the final speaker I should be quite comfortable with that. So I'm looking forward to the support from Councillors Gary along those lines. I do want to point, just a point of clarification really around D. The intention there isn't to stop there being informal feedback or conversations that councillors might have in the community about the annual plan process, or to encourage people to participate in it. It just means that those conversations aren't considered as formal submissions because there's no reliable way that those conversations can be recorded and circulated to all councillors who weren't present in those conversations. So it's certainly not an attempt to stifle what is the job of being a city councillor. It's just trying to seek some clarity around what formal submissions would be considered. I realise that this is no longer a formal legislative requirement for us to do that, but I think accepting that is dangerously close to accepting bare minimum democracy, and that's certainly not why I'm here, and nor should any of us necessarily. We've heard that the process is inefficient and costly, but unfortunately democracy is inefficient and costly. That's just how it is. And if we're looking for ways to cut costs or find efficiencies or whatever today's jargon is, I don't think the money that we have set aside for supporting democratic engagement with our community is the place to be looking for it. Thanks.
Okay, as I said, I'll take them separately. So we'll start with A. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Abstentions? Carried.
And B taken by division, please.
Right, B by division. Thank you.
Councillor Benson vote.
Aye.
Councillor Albert.
Aye.
No.
No.
Aye.
Aye.
I meant to say no. So no.
Aye.
Aye. No.
No.
No. No.
No.
No. So that's lost 6-9. I'll move on to C. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No. Recorded, please.
That's carried. D. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
Abstentions? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Law. Yes, you foreshadowed something.
Well, no, it wasn't so much that I want to foreshadow anything now. That's passed the way it has. But I was just going to check with staff on option C, which it says approves the menu of engagement options. Now, I got the impression earlier in the conversation from Sandy that of those options you may not want to go for all of them. And in the original recommendation, I felt that it was that we would approve the A and then which of those options we would engage. Now, I don't think we necessarily would do all of them, and I just wonder from staff if that's the
Can I
intent.
suggest that that's why it's called a menu?
Yeah,
Choose.
Yeah, and that's right, but that says approves the menu.
Yes, that's right. But that's what
specify which. And I just
No, that's
wonder-
right.
Yeah.
But it will come back to practicalities and resourcing, etc. But it's a menu to choose from. Right. Item 14, page 118, the delegations to the Hearings Committee. So, Sandy, you're it? Okay, you wish to, just a bit of a introduction, Sandy?
This is just to enable the Chief Executive to have a degree of flexibility around who has a delegation around certain matters related to the RMA, because at the moment it's 2 named officers, but there are occasions when the delegation needs to be exerted at a higher level, and that's just not possible as it's currently written.
Right. Questions, councillors? No questions? Now, it's been moved, Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Staines. This is the recommendation as on the order paper?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Wilson? Are there any other speakers? There being none, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Right, we move on to the notice of motion. And Councillor Benson Pope, can I invite you to speak to that? That's on page 124.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I'd like to speak a little about the context, because I think Dunedin people have been put upon for too long in respect of the provision of the quality health care that we all take for granted in this country, and I don't think there's a better example of poor provision or unnecessary delay than we're seeing with the work that is happening somewhere to replace our hospital. I'd be surprised if there were anyone at this table, indeed many people in the city, who didn't think that the current location was ideal for an important major teaching hospital in this region, across the road from the medical school, a medical school that is without doubt the premier medical school in this country. And if Dunedin has got anyone to thank, then it should be extremely grateful to those visionary people in the university administration who managed to capture 3 other centres in this country with their medical school as well. Wellington and Christchurch don't like it much, But you know what you see if you drive past Hagley Park, and you'll see the University of Otago on the buildings, because the 3 clinical schools are here and Christchurch and Wellington. And that has stood us in great stead, and it's meant the continued health of the health sciences section of our university. And of course, a much wider medical precinct. We know the buildings that are associated, we know the ideal location in the general area of the med school, of the current hospital with lecture theatres and the like incorporated in the build, and I would anticipate that any new build, when they get on with it finally, will obviously encompass the same sorts of synergy. We also know how appropriate that central city site is in terms of good urban design, good access for various vehicular modes, and also proximity to the central city and other accommodation and so on. And so it seems obvious to me that despite the difficulties with existing buildings and past sites that have been sold and university hostels that used to be owned by the DHB and so on, and some vacant land, it is not an easy pathway, but it is a pathway that must lead to the rebuild of our teaching hospital at its present level, at least in downtown Dunedin. And the reason for moving this motion is obvious, because despite concerns expressed about this, and I believe the Mayor has just tabled a letter that is his response to some of the comments that were made in relation to the Frederick Street site, and he's making no doubt about our views. There is confusion about this, and it seems to me that the progress about the site selection is taking far too long. The thing that worries me most is the involvement of Treasury, and the fact that if you look at Treasury's past record, you know that Treasury advice, and I'll come back to that in a moment because they've provided us with the most wonderful example of what the problem is. Treasury advice is going to include the desirability of a nice green brownfields development somewhere else in the city where a site is currently owned, and I don't consider that at all acceptable. And if anyone had any doubt, then that should have been allayed by the wonderful work of the Otago Daily Times and an official information request OIAing the Treasury Advice to Cabinet on the courthouse. And if this council isn't proud of the decision it made to run a campaign to get funding to restore the courthouse, it should be, because it's a perfect example of the power of public opinion. And I think it's probably appropriate to acknowledge those thousands of Dunedin citizens who sent postcards to Wellington, to various cabinet ministers, telling them what their thoughts were, and we see the result of that right now as $20 million worth of public funds is being expended on a building that Treasury said wasn't fit for purpose and referred to as support of as being not the core business of justice to fund a heritage building, and acknowledged they'd already spent $7.5 million on a most unsuitable office building elsewhere. And that report, of course, featured on the 9th of February. Some of you may not have seen it, but one of the other lunatic suggestions that Treasury made in respect of the restoration of the courthouse was that they should perhaps consider knocking down the tower, and that would make it easier to strengthen. Well, this report is available to you on the ODT website, and you may have read it, but it's pretty scary reading, actually. And in the context of what I said earlier about the hospital, I want to make sure that government's left absolutely no doubt about the opinion of people in the city and this authority about where we believe our new hospital, long overdue, should be located. And it must be in the central city area, presumably as close as possible to the site that it now occupies or adjacent sites. I see an election year, it may well be that we wish to discuss this further as this matter progresses, and it may well lead to the sort of campaign. The hospital's pretty dear to people's hearts sitting around this table. I've heard you at election time campaigning on issues around this as well. It may well be that we follow the example that we previously have of not only advocating our position as a council on this matter, but also taking that in a more active way to the powers that be in Wellington, because I, for one, am not prepared to consider, even for a moment, or allow any further consideration of a non-central city site for this essential building. To say nothing of the expenditure, appropriate when we're talking about annual plans and long-term plans, the expenditure this authority is about to embark on a major rebuild of most of George Street. Whatever that looks like, who knows? We'll be discussing that as the year proceeds. And of course, at the same time, as our bus routes are being relocated to better service exactly this facility. So I don't think I need to say any more. I'd be surprised and disappointed if this weren't carried unanimously. I can't imagine that there's any objection to any of the language or any parts of the notice of motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Further speakers, Councillor Vandervis.
Councillor Benson Pope's lack of imagination is about to be improved. The central city is already overtaxed in terms of space, in terms of parking, in terms of noise. The central city is, in fact, a very poor place to build a brand new hospital. My father spent some time in the cardiac care unit there, and one of the ongoing problems was the rumblings of trucks going right beside the building all day and all night. The cost of building it in the central city, as opposed to, say, somewhere like Waikari, will be vastly greater because of access problems, because of having to demolish bits and pieces of other buildings and buy them, often at extraordinary expense, in order to build what you need in a constrained space. There is also a great difficulty in trying to transition from the old hospital to a new hospital if you are tearing down the old hospital or parts of it and building the new hospital in a similar footprint. Anyone who's done any project management will certainly understand that if you're building a new facility that you want to move an operation into, building it on the same or similar footprint as the existing facility is the most expensive and most fraught way to do it. So in terms of cost, in terms of land availability, in terms of the current already poor parking, in terms of noise from the through freight route, and in terms of the difficult transition between the old hospital and the new hospital, a greenfield site for the new hospital will, I believe, offer by far the best opportunity for us to get the new hospital that will serve Dunedin for the next 50 or perhaps even 100 years. The opportunities for expansion in the existing hospital footprint have already been fraught. One of the reasons the physio pool has become such a bone of contention is because it occupies a number of square metres of area which the hospital really at certain times has wanted to use for itself. That this council blithely gave one of the better chunks of near hospital land to ACC for their consideration recently simply adds to the existing
Can I correct you there? No one's given anything to anyone or made any agreement to give anyone to anyone. So you can say what you like, but if it's not true, I'll correct you.
I appreciate the correction. Thank you, Your Worship. My point is that land in that area is extraordinarily expensive. It is highly pressured. The availability of parking is going to become even worse when the separated cycleway goes through. I believe that there are very good, sound financial reasons and very good development reasons for Treasury to be looking at a greenfield site, especially since it already owns one apparently up in Waikato.
Further speakers? Councillor O'Malley.
I'm obviously going to vote to support this, and the only real question I have is I hope this is not the last thing that comes out of this council on this point, and I very much support the Mayor tabling his letter's response to Southern Health Partnership. I in counter to Councillor Van der Vis's statements, I think that to create a compact city, it's required that we put all of our facilities in as close together as we can possibly manage them. He says the land is very expensive down there. That means obviously it's a desirable place to be. So I think that would reflect, in fact, that is a good spot. In relationship to the medical school as well, in Christchurch and Wellington, the medical school is right next to the hospital. To move it a long way away would probably mean, it would not be an appropriate use of space or proximity. I really would like just to continue along the lines and say to Southern Health Partnership, please make sure that we are in the room and that you are, when you consider your stakeholders, that you list them right now, you are listing the providers, but you are not listing the users. I'm not against the models that they're proposing, but I am very much concerned that there's still talk about no certainty of this site, and this site does have to be downtown. Thank you.
Councillor Lord.
Yeah, look, I just, I'm not going to support this, and therefore I suppose that makes me a Philistine, but I'm going to explain my reasons why I'm a Philistine, and that simply I don't want to preclude government from making a decision that, you know, if it's that that site at Waikari is a far better site, if it is, and they want to make that decision, I'm comfortable with that. If they decided, for example, that they did a deal with Calder Stewart or something and built at the old Carisbrook site, who am I to say that's a wrong decision? So I'm just, and that's not precluding that they might go and get the Cadbury site or the old Countdown site or whatever, but I'll leave it up to them. So.
Councillor Fiso.
Thank you for the opportunity. Coming from a high-use family and high-use community, I can sort of understand why you would want to move the hospital out of the site, out of the city. But I think I expressed that view just, you know, privately, and other councillors and other people have talked to me and said, what about the young people? What about the med students? They're moving it to, say, Wakari would just be crazy. It's already their study schedule's already crazy. And what about the people, say, in South Dunedin who have to make journeys into the hospital, into the city centre? I think we need to think about them, and that's why I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Further speakers, Councillor Gary.
I'll be supporting the motion. I believe that a central city location is the only option for the new hospital, and I think in indicating our intent really early on and giving some clarity to it is extremely important. The location being adjacent to the medical school I see is really important moving forward. I've certainly personally seen the benefit of that medical school and its association with the hospital, and anything that reinforces that is extremely important to me and many people in our community. And I'd concur with Councillor O'Malley around further approaches and would like to see approaches to central government in person to make it really clear to them what the community thinks about this and the importance of having a central city location.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you, Your Worship. You know, let's just get on and get them to build the damn hospital. That's the bottom line. When you read last week's paper and you hear about water going down the walls in operating theatres and things like that, we all know that a hospital needs to be built. Common sense, I think, will prevail on where that location's going to be. But let's go, let's push them, and let's get government, and, you know, whoever the government is, let's just get on, everybody, and build a damn new hospital for this city.
We shouldn't really forget about the relationship with the dental school as well. We're getting a new dental school down there built at some great cost. I know from personal experience with my wife and her occupation and the relationship with the hospital. So having two world-class facilities down there close to each other, along with university, is an absolute no-brainer. Thank you.
Councillor Starks.
Thank you, Worship. I support the resolutions. I think if we are going to have a city of knowledge, if we are going to have a university with a medical school, then you need a teaching hospital. Our current hospital is struggling to be a good teaching hospital because its facilities are so bad. To divorce the hospital from the precinct of the university will mean that for students, a lot of wasted time. Therefore, if we wish to keep a medical school in this town, we need to fight for a teaching hospital that is adjacent to the university. I accept that the comment that there is perhaps a lack of land, but that's not entirely true. I believe as council we can act as a catalyst with some landowners. For instance, we have a block of land that's a car park at the end of the other block from the hospital. It's flat land. We have the New World supermarkets, foodstuffs, redeveloping, putting in a single level car park where there are currently buildings right adjacent to the hospital. We have now Cadbury's who are leaving the city with a large piece of city block. And while that might not be big enough to build a hospital on, there is other properties adjacent and around it that may well be able to be redeveloped to give enough land for a new hospital, still close enough to the university precinct to be a catalyst for the strength of our university to grow. So I think as a city we need to show what our bottom line is, but equally we need to put our hand up and say we'll do what we can to help facilitate the rebuild of the hospital, and please do it soon. We haven't at all committed the car park on Great King Street to ACC. We have given them the right of due diligence. No one else was prepared to sign any agreement, so I don't see that that's a problem. I think the parties, particularly ACC and the hospital redevelopment team, need to get and sit together and sort it out. There will be plenty of land for both of those buildings, given how the redevelopment could roll out. They just need to get on the same page.
Councillor Newell.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, Councillor Benson Pope, I happily support this and just echo what the other councillors have said regarding the value of the teaching hospital, the central location, as Councillor Stedman said, not forgetting the dental hospital, the training, the dentist school. Thank you. Okay. All right, and the other thing is I think we do, as a council, need to offer leadership, especially when none has been shown thus far by central government. I think it's a wonderful opportunity for us to decide what's happening to our city. That is why we were elected here. There is plenty of land for it. Obviously, there's not a plethora. There's not going to be a great big green space in the middle of it. That's not really what a hospital is about. Regarding the traffic, it's called double glazing these days, and I can't imagine that's going to keep too many people up at night. Quite frankly, the contrary nature of some councillors is just getting a little bit boring. With Councillor Wiley, we need to get together as a unit and progress this, and progress as a council and a city. Thank you.
Further speakers? Well, for my part, I will be supporting this motion. I note that all over the world, the absolute optimum situation for a hospital is up against a med school in the middle of a city. All over the world, that is considered the best you can do. And it would seem rather stupid to put a bus hub and everything down the middle of the town and then say, oh, we can save $2 or $3 million, let's put it on the edge of the town, where you might save a few $1 million, but your overall operating costs in the long run, in terms of cost to get people there, transport clinicians backwards and forwards into town or to the med school, would very quickly outstrip any savings that you'd made. It would be breathtakingly short-sighted. I acknowledge, as Councillor Vandervis has pointed out, that this is a complicated build, especially if it's not only the clinical services block that's involved. If the ward block has to be rebuilt as well, it will be a complicated situation. That's why we're paying a number of consultants rather a lot of money for rather a long time to sort it out. And we're just telling them, this is where you need to be sorting it out for the benefit of our community. Councillor Staines has outlined the various options that are opening up as we speak, right along there. There's three major blocks from Frederick Street to Stewart Street, and there are increasing options, sadly, in the case of Cadbury's, right through there. So there'll be absolutely no reason for options that will provide for a new hospital that works perfectly well to be built there. So I can only say that this, to me, is, as I think Councillor Steadman said, a complete no-brainer. And we just need to be, given that Treasury's view is always going to be what's the cheapest option, we need to be telling them that we're more interested in the value to our community. It's all very fine knowing what the cost is, but if you don't appreciate the value, then you're not making a real comparison. So that sums up my support for this. So I will now come back to Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you. I think it's entirely appropriate that that position that you just reinforced around the compactness of the city and its advantage is a key part of this discussion. We are the envy of many other cities, and the cruise ship people comment on it because we haven't had the central city gutted the way Christchurch was gutted by urban supermarket breakout long before it was destroyed by an earthquake. And that makes us unique in New Zealand, actually, and also internationally. And clearly, the medical complex is essential to the population of the inner city area and will become more so. I don't support those who would be happy with whatever wise decision government might make, because government, unless it feels the pressure of the population, makes stupid decisions based on stupid Treasury advice of the sort that Treasury tendered around the courthouse. And I think we're lucky to have such a wonderful example of what the risk can be, and I'd like to see in the very near future these communications go to Wellington and that lead in short order to the removal of non-central site as any possibility for consideration. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Sorry? Division. Okay.
Aye. I said aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye. No.
Yes.
Aye. That's carried. Okay, I will now move from the chair the resolution to exclude the public and go into non-public. Seconded Councillor Staines. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.